The coaching carousel is about to come to a stop. This year, more than most, has had some incredibly high-level coaches become available, and some franchises that haven't had to search for a coach in many, many years got back on the carousel. We're going to rank the hirings for each team and give the positives and negatives. But first, why were some coaches left out in the cold? Of course, the biggest name available in this hiring cycle was Bill Belichick. He's just 26 wins away from tying the all-time record held by Don Shula, and he no doubt wants to get there. He's won 6 Super Bowls and is widely regarded as one of the best coaches ever. So why couldn't he get a job? Most likely it's because Belichick has had the ability to operate as head coach and head of personnel for several years and would want that same responsibility wherever he lands next. And let's be honest, Belichick the GM has been letting down Belichick the head coach for quite some time. The only real team that gave him an interview was the Atlanta Falcons, and it appears that once it was clear he was unwilling to just be the coach and let the current front office pick his players, there was a sudden drop-off in interest from both sides. My guess is he'll catch on next year because he wants that record and might be willing to lower his listed demands by that time. Mike Vrabel was also let go this offseason from the Titans, where he had accumulated a record of 54-45 over his last 6 years with Tennessee. But with back-to-back losing seasons, it appears that ownership wanted to go in a new direction. Vrabel is a culture-setting, accountability-holding, hard-working head coach, and I truly expected him to land with a new team immediately. That does not appear it will happen this season, and for him, I have less understanding of why. I don't believe it's about Vrabel not being the guy for the job, but these teams are searching for the new up-and-coming guy. So who were the teams that passed on these exceptional head coaches in favor of other options? The teams with head coach openings this year were the New England Patriots, Tennessee Titans, Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons, LA Chargers, Seattle Seahawks, Washington Commanders, and the Las Vegas Raiders. Quite a list. The Patriots and Seahawks haven't had to hire new coaches in over a decade. Meanwhile, the Carolina Panthers are on their 7th coach in 4 years. And it's with them that we'll start the rankings. In last place is the Carolina Panthers. It's no insult to Dave Canales, but it's likely that David Tepper, who has skyrocketed to the top as the worst owner in the NFL, couldn't have hired any of the top candidates who had other options because he's made it clear he has a short fuse and meddles in football decisions, i.e. Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. The situation just isn't one where it's likely that any head coach will succeed. However, I see what they're trying to do by bringing in Canales. He has recent success in getting Geno Smith to play the best football of his career in Seattle, earning him MVP votes in the process. And then he potentially saved Baker Mayfield from the same fate as a Ryan Fitzpatrick and led the Bucs to a playoff win as their offensive coordinator. Canales will no doubt be better for Bryce Young than Frank Reich was, and the Panthers already have a good defense. So perhaps they'll be able to bounce back quickly in what is still a pretty weak division. Regardless, Canales has learned under Pete Carroll about how to run a successful franchise and should bring a lot of that experience with him. If he can get the owner to stay out of the way, which is highly unlikely, and their new GM Dan Morgan makes some good personnel moves, then there's a chance this works. There's just no world where the Panthers and David Tepper will be above last place here though. Coming in at number 7 is the Tennessee Titans. First of all, they should never have fired Mike Vrabel unless it was partially his decision to leave as well. Still, the decision was made and they have moved on to Brian Callahan. I think Callahan is a good hire, and especially if he brings his dad over to help run the offense, and more specifically the run game, then I think you'll see Tennessee be able to keep a good amount of their identity as a smash-mouth, run-first team with good play action. Brian has a ton of experience in different organizations. He's seen success winning the Super Bowl with the Broncos and going to another one as the offensive coordinator with Cincinnati. He's also coached for the 2016 Lions and 2018 Raiders, so it's safe to say he can speak to what you should and shouldn't do to have a winning team. I think what he was able to do in calling plays for both a number 1 overall pick and blue chip player in Joe Burrow, as well as his backup and former undrafted free agent Jake Browning, shows he can alter his play calling to suit the quarterback. And in Tennessee, they have some distinctly different quarterback options, should they decide to stick with those in-house. And I think he'll be a positive for the offensive side of the ball for sure. How he fills out the defensive staff will determine a lot, but they, just like the Panthers, are in a relatively easy division to turn around against. The Texans have clearly taken a step forward, but the Jaguars seem to be falling off, so now is their time to make a move. Next, in 6th place, we have the New England Patriots. I'm a big Jerod Mayo fan, but primarily as a player. He clearly has the least amount of experience of any of the new head coaches, but came up under Belichick and will keep the Patriots moving in a similar direction. He needs to hire a great offensive staff and trust their GM to find a quarterback. But I think in a head coaching role where his primary responsibility would be to hold people accountable and motivate, he might be the best person for the job. I believe his team will play incredibly hard and will be willing to run through a brick wall for him. My biggest concern is the game planning, meeting structures, and game day strategy that falls to a head coach. He'll take some time to learn it all, but if Robert Kraft trusted him to take on the responsibility, then I feel like Patriots fans need to give him the benefit of the doubt. He can't be much worse than the last 2 years, and if they find a QB, it probably solves a lot of their issues. Here in 5th place is the Atlanta Falcons. Raheem Morris was a top name throughout the hiring process for numerous teams. He interviewed for more than half of the available openings. For a period of time, though, it looked like he might miss out on getting hired as all the other teams appeared to have their favorite candidates falling into their laps. That is, until things fell apart with Belichick in Atlanta and he was quickly offered. Morris was a head coach in the same division back in 2009 to 2012 with the Bucs. It didn't go very well, but he was incredibly young and fairly inexperienced. Since then, he's spent time on 3 staffs, including a few years in Atlanta that saw him become the interim head coach after Dan Quinn was fired. Since then, he has been in LA under Sean McVay as his defensive coordinator, and from all reports, it seems Morris has grown in leadership, confidence, and strategy. I think he'll be successful quickly, assuming they find a competent quarterback. At number 4 is the Washington Commanders. Depending on who you ask, Ben Johnson seemed to always be the favorite in DC, but he decided to stick it out in Detroit and make another run at a Super Bowl. Dan Quinn was viewed as a fallback plan to fans, but if you really listen... Dan Quinn was viewed as a fallback plan to fans, but if you really listen to Adam Peters' press conference, he made it clear that leadership was the priority this hiring cycle, and there's no doubt that Quinn brings plenty of that. He started in Seattle as the DL coach before leaving to coach in college and returned as the DC during their Super Bowl run in 2013. He was hired as the Atlanta Falcons head coach shortly after, where he made it all the way back to the Super Bowl, but we all remember 28-3. Since being let go in Atlanta, he's been pretty dominant as the defensive coordinator in Dallas, despite a lack of postseason success. Quinn is widely regarded as a phenomenal leader of men and a great defensive mind. If he hires a strong offensive coordinator and they can hit on a quarterback in the draft, then this team could make a quick leap forward. Coming in at number 3 is the Las Vegas Raiders. It was really interesting to see how they handled this offseason. Josh McDaniels was fired early on in the season, and Pierce attempted to right the sinking ship, going 5-4 with wins against the Chargers and Chiefs during that time. He was a hit in the locker room and even had their star player Max Crosby come out and state that if Pierce is not kept on permanently as head coach, then he'll be requesting a trade. Even with the success and backing from star players, it really seemed like ownership was looking at other options. They finished their last game on January 7th and took nearly 2 weeks to announce the hiring of Pierce. This team is going to be good again and quickly under Pierce. The defense since he's been hired is significantly better than it was previously, and as is the case with a lot of these teams, if they find a quarterback, then the playoffs could be in their immediate future. Pierce is such a great motivator and gets the best out of his players. I love this hire for Vegas. In second place is the Seattle Seahawks. They already had one of the best rosters on this list, and with a great defensive mind like Mike Macdonald utilizing their young stars on that side of the ball, they should be able to return to levels Seattle hasn't seen since the Legion of Boom. The hiring of offensive coordinator will be important because they need to see Geno playing like he did in 2022 again. If Macdonald gets that hire correct and they hit on a few more draft picks, then the playoffs should be in the very near future for the Seahawks. Lastly, the best hire this entire offseason is Jim Harbaugh going to LA. Harbaugh is a winner. Wherever he goes, he wins at the highest level. He took the 49ers to the Super Bowl, he won a national championship at Michigan, and I believe he chose the Chargers because he thinks he can get them all the way to the top. Granted, he'll likely only be there for 4 to 5 years before he leaves to go do something else on his bucket list, but there is no doubt in my mind that he'll have them winning consistently, immediately. His teams all play incredibly hard, value the run game and defense, and have a culture of toughness. Give him a quarterback like Justin Herbert, and it is just the cherry on top. The Chargers will be in the AFC Championship game within the next 2 years. Let me know where you rank these hirings down in the comments, like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.